to call to order the regular Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, January 14th. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. That's done. Moving on to my update, didn't want to report a couple things. First of all, it was nice to attend the opening of the new legislative session in Hartford last week, and just hear the governor's kind of state of the state address, which I know we're going to be getting a lot more about budgets and things like that later when he does his budgetary address. But so it's just nice to go up there and speak to you know, our newly elected legislature. So excited to get that started. Wanted to also just update, you know, let the community know we're in the full throttle in the budgeting process now. I submitted last week to the Selectmen my recommended operating budget for the town. I think we've really focused on trying to keep our costs down as we do every year, but this year in particular, we're really just focusing on maintaining operations. Part of the Madison investment plan is recognizing that we're going to be continuing to see increases in debt service as the bonding projects grow into their fruition and we issue more bonds. And so every year we're trying to offset that in some way with other things. So this year, the operating budget that I submitted is growing at 2.5%, which I think is a very reasonable number considering we're still in the midst of a lot of inflation and getting impacted by a lot of cost escalation. So, so that process will be starting and encourage the public to participate. Each board, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, have individual workshops that review the budget and make decisions. And there'll be a public hearing. The first public hearing will be in March and the second public hearing will be in April about the budget. So please just stay engaged and follow along, and there'll be a lot of information available on the website about how the town spends its money. So that's it for my update today. Any liaison reports?
I'll give a quick one just regarding our Affordable Housing Committee. I've been encouraging them to get together a presentation to come before the board just so that we can get an update on the work that they've been doing. And they do have some ideas regarding financial and or land trust funds that would help to move us in the direction of the ticking off an item on the affordable housing plan that we adopted a while back. So I'm hoping, Peggy, that they'll be reaching out to you in the next several weeks to get on our meeting schedule.
Great.
Nothing for me, Peggy.
Okay, great. I know you have some academy's been moving along, but we're going to be hearing from them later. And we will have an update in February from the new school, the Neck River Elementary School. So they're going to be coming and talking to us about where they are in the project, where they are in the budget, all good news, which is great. They're moving along in the redistricting plan that's set to launch this summer for the next school year is going to be moving ahead as scheduled. So but we'll be getting a full update from them I think it's in February is the plan for them to come back. So, all right, well, great. So I think moving on to citizens' comments, if we have some time here, please raise your hand and state your name and address and limit your comments to 2 minutes, please.
Go ahead, Fran.
Hi, Fran Brady, 108 Genesee Lane, North Madison, just referencing some old business. I understand that we've all been very busy since I last presented my tree ordinance proposal in October, especially with the holidays and other pressing issues before the town. But the importance of establishing a proper tree ordinance has only grown each day. The need becomes more urgent as another specimen tree faces the threat of being cut down. Currently a rare disease-free American chestnut on the 9-acre wooded lot at 155 New Road is at risk. Already a number were apparently cut down earlier on the 3-acre southern lot. I sincerely hope that we can find the time to move this proposal forward. Thank you for your service and attention to this matter.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other hands raised? There's an opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment as well.
There are not.
Okay, great. We will move on then to item number 6, the consent agenda. If I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And obviously a lot of reappointments. This is a kind of a standard process we go through every year with different changes on the different boards and commissions. And some people decide to stay on and serve another term, some don't, and it's kind of back and forth. I would just like to highlight one notable thing is we, I think, are appointing our new member to the Board of Finance. So we welcome him, and he will be replacing Gene Fitzgerald. His name is John Mueller. So welcome to him to joining the Board of Finance. I'm sure we'll be have an opportunity to see more of him in the coming weeks and months. Otherwise, if all in agreement, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, just the 3 of us today right now. So consent agenda is approved. So thank you. Moving on to item number 7.
Excuse me, Peggy, I think Scott is ready to be promoted.
Okay, Jeannie, if you see him on there.
I got him.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Give him a second to come up. So today we're going to get an update from the Community Center Building Committee about their welcome, Scott. And this is a follow-on to several conversations, several meetings that we've had over the last since December, and hear about the results of the bids that came out and kind of the project cost. And we'd asked the committee to come back with us with a recommendation about what they think the final package should be in terms of the project, if we're going to go out and ask for additional funding. So I want to welcome the committee chair, Joe Ballantyne, who I see his name popping up. And Joe, is there any other, is Colliers included in this as well, or? Joe, can you, oh, there you are. Good.
I
Great,
had to be,
okay.
I had to be promoted. John Coppolis is on also,
Okay.
and so and Tom McCary. There's Tom.
Great, welcome, welcome.
Good morning,
Peggy,
everybody.
there are a couple of other committee members that we might want to promote as well.
Sure, Jeannie, I know you know the committee. If you want to include the entire committee, that's great. Would love to have them join us. I know this is kind of an odd time. Usually we have evening meetings when we're talking about Academy, but we're trying to get a lot done here.
Those who are listening and maybe don't see, Dave Spurley, Vice Chair, has joined, and Kelly and Joan Walker, also from the committee, are on, along with the architect Tom McCary and a representative from Colliers, John Coppolis. I don't see his name. Oh, there's John.
Yep, he's great. All right, well, I know you guys have been, you know, in you've had several meetings, and so I guess we look forward to hearing your report.
To just to bring everybody up to the same point as where the committee is, just a brief recap. We had the bids we had put out an RFP for the bids to bid on the full restoration of the building. It was put together by Tom McCary and his group, and that was put out sometime in November. The bids came in on December 10th. From December 10th, from this point, we've been reviewing the bids and looking at details and looking for doing a review on the bids themselves. On some of our initial meetings, we looked at the viability of each of the bidders and what they had bid. We eventually got to a point where we were able to look at the bidders and the bid content. The bids were organized so that there was a general bid for a package for the sort of the building as a whole. And there were, I believe, 11 ad alternates that were bid independently. We reviewed each of these ad alternates at our previous meeting on the I believe it was on the 7th. We looked at which of the ad alternates we should keep in the GC, which we thought would be best handled outside of the bid award. And we also found too that we felt that could be deleted altogether from the project. We now have, and as of last night, we took all that information, the bids as presented for the total package, the base package, and the ad alternates, and looked at each of the ad alternates for its viability and if had any scope changes. And we came to several conclusions. As I said, the 2 of them were eliminated. 3 would be handled outside of the GC, and the other 5 would be handled by the GC. We from that, using that information, the information from the bids, information from the estimates from the scope of the project, and with input from both the Colliers and the architect, QAM, we tried to develop, and we came up with at least a version of what we think the total project will cost, the full dollar amount of the project, if we kept to the scope of the original referendum. Any questions so far? No. We have a version of that available. John, could you bring that up, please? It's long.
Certainly.
Has a lot of entries. If you share your screen, what you should see is well, okay, this excuse me, this is the first of the bid evaluation of the bid packages. You can see that we had 5 bidders, and each of them did bid, or at least indicated some bid on each of the ad alternates. The green columns, as John will point to, were the ones that we believe that would be best handled by the GC and handled during the time of the construction. The pink ones, the first 3.
First 3.
We thought we'd be the 3, 5, and 8 would best be handled by the town resources, and they would be done, or they could be done at or near the end of the project. The last 2, one is an extra cover, liquid encapsulant for lead paint that was deemed unnecessary, and that is an additional flooring step that was again decided that the original concrete flooring, polished, would be sufficient, and actually maybe more attractive. So that those 2, 9 and 10, were eliminated totally from the scope of the project. This is the this is what we worked on last night, and had an hour and a half or so of a good discussion about what we thought would be the scope of the cost of the scope of the project as it was envisioned in the 2022 referendum. The total related construction, which was originally estimated to be 12.180 million, has been now been supplanted by the actual bid price of the lowest bidder. The total construction of that, from that, which included both the base and the 5 ad alternates, was 18,958. This next, where we evaluated the loose furnishings, AV equipment. Some of it's been escalated from the original. As you can see, each of those were escalated. I believe, is that 6%, John?
It's about 8%, Joe.
8%, sorry.
Yes.
8%, 8% escalation to account for the cost increases between 2022 and 2025, when this was 2025/2026, when the construction would go on. Some of the ad alternates, H, I, and J, were actually reduced the scope. We thought that the scope was maybe a little over generous, and so we took some items out, and those are lower than what you might see on the previous, but they reflect what we thought was the scope required for the building. Any questions so far? No. Okay. The fees and expenses, these were similar to what was in the original 2020, the original 2022. Some of them were changed. The hazmat, we found that we need because of the amount of abatement that's needed, the hazmat consultant cost has been increased. Other than that, pretty much we were pretty much the same. The cost of the architect was also increased because of extra work that was required to get to the final drawings. Last part are the expenses. Some escalations, some adjustments. Well, one of the things that we need confirmed by the town is the financing costs. It was originally estimated to be $650,000. I think there was some information that we received that the bonding cost was less than originally estimated, so we put a lower number in there. Last but not least is the owner's construction and project contingency. Yeah, which we debated up and down, but thought with the level of and the type of construction that an 8% contingency would be appropriate. Bottom line, the total project, an estimate for the total project now would be $23.948 million, up from 15.9, and with a delta of 8,049,000. We should note that we are not too far from the number that the 400,000 from the number that was listed as the bond, or excuse me, as the amount of the grants that we have, and we believe we could do enough changes in scope or get that get down to meet that, but we thought that we wanted to start with the full cost, what we thought would be the full cost of the project before we began to reduce scope.
Well, thank you for that. I think that not knowing all the details perhaps of the different project packages, I wouldn't mind going back to the kind of what's in and what's out slide if possible. I just wanted to kind of hear you walk through the whole thing first, but I don't know if that would be helpful for the board just to kind of talk a little bit more.
The ad alternates.
Yeah, the ad alternates, and understanding where you had made choices to keep versus so pretty much the I guess the first question is, so item 3, when we talk about the recital hall upgrades, is that out of then the number you just showed us? You're basically excluding that?
The recital hall was one of the areas where we made deep cuts to what was originally spec'd. We took the sound ending and the curtains out, which brought the recital hall upgrades down considerably.
Joe,
And
it's
Joe?
not it's the stage curtain, not the blackout curtains. I just want people to understand that.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Yep.
And so there is a recital hall upgrade. It's minimal now. It's basically the basics of what we might need in the future to be sure that the infrastructure is there. But in terms of an upgrade, Joan, maybe you could add what actually is still in that in the recital hall upgrade.
So, so there's still going to be a significant stage. There's a ramp for ADA compliance to be able to get onto that stage. There's the capability now we have in the current proposal, electronic curtains that may not be necessary in this space. We definitely want to potentially keep it for the gym because of the height of those windows versus the height of the windows in the recital area. We took out the sound deadening, the sound pieces because a sound person can adjust sound. I'm driving, so this is why I'm here. At this point in time, it still would be a fully functional stage for awards, for small concert recitals of 3 or 4 pieces instrument-wise. And it's perfectly functional as a good space. You're not going to put on a production in the recital space. The stage itself and the way the seating is would not allow for a good recital. Even if the stage is a good size, which it's a decent size, but it doesn't have the seating to allow for people to see way back if you're doing an actual production, and the amount of people that could be on that stage is much less than most stages that are in the town, quite frankly, which is why the gym piece was kept in for future. First of all, the gym piece on the curtain was kept in because that's another sound deadening for when basketball and other things are going on. And then the only thing we kept in there was also the ADA compliant lift, because if you are going to utilize that stage in the future where people could bring in their own equipment, which happens quite a bit in theater, you bring in your own lights, you bring in your own sound, then you'd have the capability to have performances in both spaces. So we did the basic to keep it functional. For a very basic, but not something where we would produce, we would have all the equipment for people to come in and do it right off the bat. That to me is something that we can do outside of the taxpayers' dollars.
Okay, great. That's helpful. So I think that I'm getting a little back response here. Is anybody else hearing that? Okay, now it's good. Thanks. I think that when this originally went to referendum, we were calling it a theater, right? The small theater in the front. And just to remind people, there's an area in the front of the building. This is not the gym. This is an area that was always identified for smaller events, small performances. And so we're kind of calling it a recital hall now, just because I think people got very confused about when you say theater, are you talking about the gym? Or are you talking about the front, right? And really the front is more about, it's a smaller stage. The seating is actually, there's a section in the middle in front of the stage, and then there's these wings, these 2 other rooms that are going to be joined, so you can broaden out and have more people seating in this space, but they're not going to have great sight lines to the stage itself. So this is not going to be an auditorium type setup with stadium seating and everything else. It's going to be more of a room that's going to be multifunctional, that has a stage in it to use for town meetings, piano recitals, award ceremony, things like that. So I just want to make sure there's not confusion about what is going. That room was always seen as a multifunctional room that would serve the community, and you could do smallish theater on the stage, more like probably children's theater, if anything. So that it sounds like those renovations are still there.
Yeah, I mean, children's theater may be a little difficult depending on the size of it, but it's presentable for those other things, and that was the thought process, was to to have something fully functional on day one, it may need a little help as far as, sound, the person coming in, but all of the conduit will be laid in both spaces so that if there are upgrades in the future, that will be easy to do because the conduit will be there for the wiring to go through. So we don't have to take apart anything in order to do any upgrades if we want to in the future.
So I just, from what my takeaway on this, and I don't know why I'm getting all this, is anybody else hearing? Like an
Yeah,
echo?
I think it keeps popping to Joe. So Joe, if you're not
Oh.
speaking, can you go on mute and then just come back?
Yeah,
on?
okay, that's helpful, thank you. So I think that, right now, what this includes the stage making it ADA compliant, right, and the recital hall. So that will be ADA compliant, the stage and the recital hall, correct, John Coppolis? Yes, okay. The stage will be ADA compliant and the walls will be taken down fully. Those two side rooms will be united so that it's more of one space. Is that still part of this plan? Because I know that we're back and forth on that.
Actually, that's a good question because that has been back and forth, and I'm trying to remember how that was left, Peggy. I don't know if Tom, do you know what the latest version of that is?
I recall what the latest version is. I still think instead of a large opening with a movable divider, it was changed to a smaller opening, a double
Doors,
door
yeah.
with solid doors.
With doors, okay.
Yes, so
Right, yeah.
really there would be no sightlines from the wings, but it would be accessible for a larger meeting. You could move back and forth easily between the center recital hall and the two wings if you were having a large meeting, but for the use on the stage, it would not be. You would not be able to have people in those outer rooms and have any sightline to the stage at all.
Right, okay. Okay, so it's just because I just want to make sure we're crystal clear, kind of. So when you talk about this upgrades thing, it's not removing any of those pieces. You're still going to have the other two rooms accessible. You're still going to have a stage that's ADA compliant, but you're not going to have, I guess, I don't know what those upgrades included in the package, but I'm just trying to understand what, by taking that out, what are we losing? Is there a list of
So it's probably
this is helpful.
the short list would be the sound dampening, sound system, light systems, that type of thing.
Okay,
What I would consider fixtures, so to speak.
right, okay. All right.
Peggy, this
So
is the, excuse me, this
the
is
schematic,
the area here showing what those flanking rooms, the connection format is now. At one point, we were looking at removing a full section of this wall here, but that has since been, modified, and now we just have, double doors connecting these side wings to the central recital hall space.
And what is the seating capacity of the recital hall space in the middle there? Just that space, not the community space to the sides.
I don't know if Tom may know that number. I think it's
If I can,
sorry.
I think it varies depending on the seating configuration. Is it tables and chairs? Is it just chairs? I think with just chairs, it's about 150 to 200.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
Okay,
Yeah, depending on
and
how
so
the
you're-
rows are spaced.
Right. Okay, so the spacing is the seating capacity. When we had talked about, I mean, I know this has gone through iterations, and I know part of when people talk about value engineering, there has been value engineering already to the space, right? Because it was going to be very cost prohibitive to actually make those open wings. I know this was a conversation that was had like earlier in this year about that. So, but still, the core space is a reasonable size meeting space that would have sightlines to the stage. The stage would be ADA compliant, and it would allow for smaller type of performances. So that's in the core package that you're recommending.
Correct.
Okay, so I think this is helpful just because there's been a lot of conversation about this. So when we see those, so by removing that, you're just talking about certain elements to the stage in the room in terms of sound and lighting. That's what that add alternate was, right? That was not about, you're still going to be renovating the recital hall.
Yes, everything that's depicted on this drawing here is being done as part of the base scope of work.
Okay,
Here, the ramp access, handicap access to the stage, the modified stage. There are curtains as part of the base scope.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then if we could go back to the alternate page again, I just wanted to make sure we all understood what that was, because that was something that had been removed. Now, if we could talk about I know Joan touched on some of this, the gymnasium performance upgrades. If we could
So that-
talk exactly what's in
Yeah,
that package. Yeah.
That's basically refinishing the floor and a new curtain and then an ADA compliant lift to be put in at that point. That's it. There's there's no other scope to that. And
Okay.
it was a very, as you can see by the dollar figure, we thought that that would be good to do it at this point in time, because then the entire area is ADA compliant then and for future use kind of thing. And then the stage curtain actually is utilized as a sound dampener and also would be a protector if there's a basketball or pickleball game going on and nothing's going to jump up on the stage.
And there is no, so just to be clear, there's no, fancy lighting going
Nothing,
into the gym.
The only
Um,
thing going into the gym, once again, is that conduit for future, so that we don't have to tear up any ceilings or walls when you go to do wiring, if in the future there's, private funding to be able to put up those types of things.
Right, so if there was a group that wanted to fundraise and make some upgrades to anything in the building, all that's in here is, some space, some conduit, tubes, whatever you want to call it, to add additional upgrades later.
Yeah. The infrastructure
Yeah,
Right.
right,
is part of the base scope of work.
okay. And what about the bleachers in this?
Those were removed, Peggy.
Okay, so the bleachers are just gone. There's no bleachers in the gym.
Correct.
Okay. And the floor you said is just being refinished, so it's not putting in a new, what's the floor in that gym? Is it wood or is?
No, there is a new floor system going in.
Yeah, the current floor is asbestos tile, so that has to be removed, and then the glue underneath it has to be removed.
Okay, so, yeah,
Peggy, the new floor is a resilient welded sheet flooring that has a pad underneath it. It will look like a wood floor. It has a resilient pad underneath it, but the total thickness of the entire assembly is about 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. There was no real there was no way for us to put a true wood floor in there and get accessibility to the gym because of the chains.
and the height and everything.
Yeah.
And just remind me though, but I guess, and this is because I know these conversations have gone on for several years now, and I know we've talked about different scenarios. Is the floor in the base package or is the floor part of this upgrade, the add alternate?
That's in the base package.
Okay, so the floor is going to get done in the base package. The
Yes.
add alternate is just focusing on the curtain and then the ADA lift. Okay,
And-
because I
and
would
the
have
sta- and the
surprised we would have
stage
gotten a
floor
floor
as well.
for that amount of money. So,
Right.
okay,
And
Also,
the stage floor as well, the refinishing of the stage floor.
and
that's what's
also,
being refinished. Okay,
also in the base package are the windows in the gym. There are several large windows. They will be essentially redone and reinstalled. They're covered now with plywood to save them from any further damage, but the windows themselves will look the same as they are now.
so basically though, the gym will be a freshened, new floor, usable gym with the base package, right? For gym purposes. And then the add-on package is, you know, enhancements to the stage, basically.
Oh, and
Okay.
excuse me, and also to the gym itself, Peggy. Part of the add-on or electronic backboards, scoreboard, and wall padding on the perimeter walls. So that's part of that alternate upgrade.
Okay.
It's not part of that alternate, it's part of another alternate. That's the gym equipment alternate.
Gym
And that's
equipment
now an
alternate.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's in the gym.
FF&E.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm just trying to, you know, when we talk about these packages, people understand what's in each of those would be helpful. So that's helpful. I don't know if we want to go back to that list again and I'm just trying to dig in so people understand, because I think that these are catch-alls for a lot of different things. So I want, you know, the public to understand what's in each of these. Maybe we could talk about the sports equipment upgrades. You've opted to take that out, though. So you're saying that you're not recommending then upgrades to the scoreboards or any of that as part of the package.
No, that was, let me jump to this summary here.
Oh, it was under,
That is this alternate here for the gym equipment.
oh, you do have that in there. Okay.
Yes,
I guess I
that-
was thinking like the red was ones that you were taking out and the green was ones we were keeping in, but I guess.
The red, yeah, just to clarify, the red number 3, number 5, and number 8 were removed from the general contractor's base bid scope of work,
Okay, not
And-
removed from the project.
and
Okay.
those were placed here. So 3, 5, and 8 are these items here, Peggy.
Okay, all right.
It
That
may be
was a
for
little-
future reference, we should
yeah.
move that to orange, and then the reds would be the removals that for color
Yeah,
code.
like, yeah, and so that's where I got a little confused. So the red is not necessarily mean you're removing it from the project. It's just that the contractor is not going to do it. We would bid it out separately because it's more cost
Correct.
effective. Right, okay. So the sports equipment you do have in the package still then, and that includes, in addition to the scoreboarding and things like that, what else is in that package?
That is the electronic backboards, the basketball backboards, electronic, the scoreboard, and the wall padding on the perimeter of the space.
expensive
Those are the
stuff.
gym equipment items.
Okay, all right. And then I think item 6 is worth having a conversation about, the parking lot upgrades. This is all included as part of the base package, right?
Correct.
And really 6 and 7 are kind of the same, aren't they? I mean, it's all that whole redoing of the area because the septic, or is there other elements of this?
There are other elements. I don't know, Tom, if you want to elaborate on that, but
If you have a picture
Yeah,
that you could show, like you did with, do you have
yeah,
like an outside schematic?
let me find that page.
John, which alternate?
The site upgrades and the parking lot upgrades.
Ooh,
Let's see where that is in this package here. If you want to speak to that, Tom, and I'll try to find the best drawing to share that.
so the site upgrades and the parking lot upgrades, Peggy, basically account for everything outside the perimeter of the building.
Mhm.
The very base scope of work, if those alternates were not selected, essentially includes a handful of concrete sidewalks just to get in the building and clean up of the existing parking area, like clean up the edges, so that we could create accessibility at the new main entrance. But this is the overall site plan, and if you look to the upper left in the new parking lot, we are completely reconfiguring the existing parking area, making it a viable parking lot. We're increasing the parking spots by a significant number. We're creating a drop off at the front entrance patio so that people can be dropped off and there's an accessible path to the front entryway. We're creating a new dumpster pad location, new sidewalks at the perimeter of the parking lot, and new access walks to all 4 of the buildings.
So, and just so to remind us, when we had originally done this a couple of years ago, this parking lot was really not gonna have a lot, it was just gonna be, I think, repaved or resurfaced, and, there was not an expectation of redesigning the parking lot.
That is correct. It was
Yeah.
to be cleaned up.
Right.
The
And,
existing is gonna be cleaned up. We also, as a part of this, have reconstructed all of the subsurface drainage and rebuilt all of the infrastructure to current town standards.
and the septic, can you please point out where the septic is?
So the septic field, the leaching field, is above the parking area and it runs through the outfield of the two softball fields. So it basically runs north-south. Those were the only areas where the soils were suitable for the septic. That is both the primary and the reserve fields. And then the septic tank is outside the building somewheres. I can't see it at this scale. And then, the discharge runs from the tank out to the fields. But all of that piping runs under the new parking area. So, it's a little bit of a catch-22. I don't want to say it's entirely the septic field's responsibility, but the playscape has to be moved because of the septic field. We would be tearing up the parking lot anyways because we have to run all the new infrastructure out to the septic field. So they're sort of interchanged a little bit.
And where is the new playground expected to be?
So the playground is right
here.
Directly to the right of the sort of hammer configuration in the parking area. It's a fenced-in area right up against the building, just to the north of the entry patio. The entry patio is sort of right there in the center of the screen. It has a patio and walk to the new entrance. It has a seating, planting wall, and then there is the walkway to the south parking area.
So just to highlight, I think that from the public's benefit, there's a positive that came out of this, because I think having the playground, and I know that your committee had talked about this a while back, adjoining the community center is going to be a good benefit for families. So that, if you have children of different ages, and I've lived through this, and I know everybody's lived through this, where you got one kid going to basketball and you have a smaller child, you're in like more of an area that is adjacent to each other, and you kind of interchangeable with the community center. So that's not the reason that it was moved. It was moved because we need the space where the current playground is for the septic system. But now we found a location that actually might enhance its use and be better for families.
That's correct. I think it's more central. It's more secure where it is. It's located between the community center and the play fields. It's also going to be fully accessible now. So I think there's a lot of sort of indirect benefits that came out of the replacement. Same thing goes for the parking area. There's now more parking directly adjacent to the fields. There's a drop-off loop. So, families and athletes can be dropped off and picked up. Overall, the new configuration has the indirect benefit of, better supporting the recreational function and experience, as well as the security and lighting of the site and access to the site and circulation to the site. The previous layout was just a free-for-all.
Right. So the other question I had is, I know there's been some discussion about the pavers, I guess, that were added by the ACA committee because they thought it was going to obviously make it more visually appealing. Can you explain that a little bit, and what impact on costs that has had to the site work budget?
So the second alternate is the inclusion of the site upgrades, which includes the entrance patio, which is all pervious pavers, which we talked about is at the top of the image here in the center. And then the connecting walkway that extends from the entrance patio to the south curb edge where the parking is along is that a School Street. That patio is all pervious pavers. It has seating areas, has planting areas. It has overhead festoon lighting. This is seen not only as the access way from the south parking area to the entrance. So we're creating now a new fully handicap accessible entrance from the parking on School Street to the main entrance, but it's also seen as an activity area, an outdoor classroom area. It could be used for art festivals. It could be used for a pre-function space when there's activities on the green. It really expands the exterior programming options and takes what was gonna be just a simple 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk and, you know, really makes this an accessible experience for the center.
And will these kind of tie in with the brick theme a little bit that we have in our downtown, or these are, when we talk about impervious pavers, is part of this trying to tie this together with the downtown?
Well, yes, in the bigger picture, this is planned to be a continuation of the sidewalks, which are not seen in this picture, but they're to the right, to the east of the site. So it's a link, but the pavers are all similar in configuration, maybe slightly different in color. ACA asked us to make them a tan and brown color instead of a red color because the existing historic building has very distinct red bricks. So they wanted it to be slightly different than that.
Okay.
But a very similar configuration. And then all of the light fixtures, you know, Historic District Commission and ACO were very specific about some of the amenities, the light fixtures, the bollards, the benches, the plantings. I'm not blaming ACA or SHPO by any means. I'm just saying that, you know, a lot of the direction regarding this solution was discussed and approved by ACA. So that's where we ended up from a design perspective. It's really
but I think we have to remind that this is in the center of our town. It's part of the historic district.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is, I guess, this plan, which was, you know, is trying to tie into that, and so it looks like part of the community and part of the historic district, I'm assuming. Are there visuals that you've prepared, like sketches and things like that shows this?
There are renderings of this space that to present to ACA and HDC. I am sorry, I don't have them available with me.
Yeah, no, I think that would be, some of this I think is really important for people to understand what we're getting for our money, right? You know, so allow the public to look at this, and we will be doing all that if the board moves forward to referendum. Obviously, we're going to be providing as many visuals as possible. Because it's, you know, we have all these conversations about all these specific rooms, but it's easier when you're visualizing, right? So things like that. That's a great.
Yes.
Yeah. So just so the public who's, you know, understanding when we talk about this walkway, this was not part of the original plan, right? So none of this was. So but as we had to make some changes to the land around the building because of the septic system that required the parking, then it kind of, you know, evolved into, well, let's make it nice, you know, not just nice, but something that's going to blend in with the historic district. So yeah, so it's beautiful. But this is where when you see hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, added to the budget, this is driving that, obviously, right? Some of this is driving that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want people to understand what you're getting for that money. And this will be usable
Understood.
functioning space.
Absolutely. It's really, you can see here in this picture, we really envision it as an outdoor activity space. You know, one of the original thought process was that this campus would be sort of a performing arts campus, and you know, this exterior, this outdoor activity space or classroom or plaza is really envisioned as a program space for the town to use.
Okay, great. I think this is good to see the updated visuals. I know the committee has been looking at all of this for a while, but just in terms of people who are attending our meetings. So, I mean, I think that was, I just wanted to dig in a little bit today, and I know we're kind of bumping up a lot of time. I don't know if board members have other questions. I'm guessing we might want to ask more specifics again or reach out. I don't know if anybody else has any questions from the board.
I think it was helpful to go through the add alternates in a little more detail. I think there's a lot of nuances there, so really helpful to peel back the onion. Thank you for doing that.
And then, could you just remind me the size of the gym? Like what age of, say, basketball, for example, would the court be sized for? Is it large enough for high school students, or is it more like a middle school and youth size basketball court?
It's really more of like an elementary school size basketball court. So
Okay.
this will be youth activities, senior activities, maybe, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, older middle-aged men basketball league, and but more appropriate, you know, the younger kids
Okay.
basketball.
Perfect. And then the floor, it sounds like that's the same type of floor, that welded sheet, like we just put in town campus, and that floor looks beautiful. And then my only other thought would be, is, you know, with the patio being a different kind of design than was originally anticipated, would there be an opportunity maybe to sell bricks to the community to help offset some of those costs? Just, you know, just throwing it
Yeah.
out there as an idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that would be an option. That's not currently programmed, but that would be an option.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I guess the takeaway from this, you've come up with your recommendations. I appreciate all the hard work of the committee to do that. I think our board has some big discussions. I think that obviously there's a lot of detail behind these numbers, and obviously the committee has been the group that has been really living and breathing this with our advisors over the last year. So I apologize if we seem not to know all the details, but I think we're all familiar with a lot of this. But you know, now we're going to be making decisions about asking for funding for all these things, right? So I think that's where getting in and peeling back the onion, so to speak, like Scott talked about, is important. If we're going to be asking for more fund, to be able to spend more money on this project in terms of applying the grant funds, we need to know exactly what we're getting for that, because there's a lot of conversation out there about you're not even going to get this, or you're not going to get that, or it's loaded up with all this extra stuff when it's really not. So I think that's what we want to make sure that we're clear about what we're getting in this package.
Can I ask one more question just to sort of bottom something out? I just want to make sure I understand it, and I think public understands it as well. You guys alluded to removing 3, 5, and 8 as add alternates from the contractors. So how does that process work? Is it, did they understand it? They knew that going into the bid process, that 3, 5, and 8 were now off the table?
No, the process was each of the bidders had to bid separately on all 11 items. But they were add alternates, meaning they could be either awarded or not awarded to the general contractor. So the committee went through and made some of the decisions we talked about earlier. What can what can be best handled by an outside firm and not the general contractor, and what parts of these ad alternates are best done concurrently with the construction of the building, like for instance, the parking lot upgrades and the site upgrades. That probably was never going to go anywhere other than the general contractor, but we wanted to make that a choice. If you look at some of the values we got some pretty widespread of bids, and so we also looked at that, and we also looked at how it impacted the total cost. And if you scroll a little to the left, I think you find PAC is the lowest overall at this point.
I guess, Joe, I just wasn't sure on the legal obligations from a contracting standpoint when we're or a bidding process standpoint. How that works, whether we've now decided we're pulling some things back. How does that process work? I'm not as familiar with that.
That was fully understood from the beginning, and that's why they were added. That's why we put them in as ad alternates, and they would be awarded separately from the GC contract.
Thank you.
And then I'm just going to piggyback on Scott's question just for purpose of clarity. Even though some of these ad alternates are being peeled back from the GCs, it doesn't affect where the funds are coming from to pay for these projects, correct? It would all still be paid through the bonding referendum.
That is correct.
Okay, fantastic.
It may change some of the timing because the funding would not, or the payments will not go to the GC. It would go to a different contractor over a different time period.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, with that then, I guess I appreciate the report. I think we might want to mull over, I think what would be helpful is to have like just a list, of
And
what
then what's
you're
out.
doing. Yeah, what's out and what's in. Not a lot was taken out, really. You dropped 2 of them, it sounds like, completely from the package. And just explaining, and I know you have this in other parts, but just, a summary thing that just explains what each alternate
We
includes.
finished this about 7 o'clock last night. So
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
so
I'm just
we
saying
didn't have a
that,
lot of time to put that kind of thing together, but
Yeah.
we were available to be able to discuss what we decided, and now be able to move towards more of a presentation than just an explanation.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I understand that, and having our questions, you'll understand like how you in the weeds see it versus how us coming fresh into it look at it. So I think having the details would be really helpful.
And the public, right? I mean, it's important to sort of have the public understand what's in and what's out. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes.
So I guess with that, then I think the other item on here is I just had a quick discussion as a follow-up to our special meeting last week about, timing of doing any kind of referenda if we were going to move forward with that. So thank you for attending, everybody. And then the board will just have a quick conversation, I think, about the timelines. So we'll move on to item 8.
Is Bruce
Okay.
coming at all?
Bruce is going to be, he said it might be towards the end of the meeting.
Okay.
So,
I have to go. See you guys. See you, Peggy.
okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Tom.
I'm going to hang on, but you can take me off as a panelist.
Yeah, I think Gina just had the board. So, when we met, last week, it seems like, we discussed, the various pros and cons of, doing something more quickly to get an approval from the town to apply the grant funds prior to the bids expiring, which is March 20th, or waiting until May 6th. And we kind of saw that there were a lot of pros and cons to each choice, right? My takeaway from that conversation was that we were leaning heavily towards May 6th, and there were, there's definitely some cons to that, but the pros seem to outweigh the cons of where we are. And I think today's conversation shows there's a lot of information we still need to get out to the public. And if we wait until May 6th, we're going to have more time to do that and do that in a clear way so that they can make an informed decision when they're voting on this, versus trying to push something through prior to March 20th. So I did just send around a kind of a draft timeline of what that would look like. I feel like we've got to set this in stone at one point. We can't vote to call the referendum because we don't want to do that until the timeline that kicks in a whole official timeline. But what we might want to do, which is what we did last time, is adopt a timeline officially. That allows the town clerk, the register of voters to start ramping up and scheduling rooms for the referendum, although we know it's a budget referendum, but just, making or organizationally figuring things out, thinking about the ballot. It gives them the green light to go ahead and start making all these plans. And then it also allows us to start scheduling our meetings that we have to do, and the Board of Finance participates in this, and a town meeting. So we kind of need to and so my thought was formally adopting a May 6th timeline at our next meeting that would lay out the schedule. The timeline, I just sent around a draft to the board. It focused on more trying to use regular meeting dates, right? Do we want to try to do this outside of our regular meeting? Or do we want to just try to keep this as much to our meetings and the Board of Finance meetings? There's pros and cons to that. Scheduling is easy because we all have it on our calendars. We have the rooms, we have the facilities available. But is it, the most beneficial? Because we also do a lot of business at our meetings. So now this is a big hot topic. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of the public attending. So we got to think about that. It would be helpful to get some feedback. I don't know if you want me to show this timeline. Jeannie, if you could maybe share it, or actually I can share it. I think I've got it. Let me just see if I've got it.
Before you do that, just
Yeah.
maybe just a reaction or a couple questions to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're clear. So what this means if we go to the May 6th is we would likely be required to do a rebid, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so I know there was a conversation during our last meeting about potentially going back and asking whether or not the bidders would extend their bids. Do you know, did that happen?
Good question. I don't know if there was we never formally requested them to do that. I don't think the building committee formally requested. I think the question was, the thought process was, we needed them to have some time to look into, was this the best way to configure it? That, because this was pushed out with the idea that we wouldn't be too far off, right? Our budget, that we might have an ability then to kind of swap in an alternate or two and we'd be there, right, with our budget. And so that's how it was structured with all these alternates. When the bids came back, we realized we are so far off what our estimates were, right? So that left us in a very different kind of conversation. So I feel like that bid was structured because of on a different set of estimates, you know what I mean? And now reality is set in, and it's like, do we really want to stick with that package that was structured to suit that purpose when we know that didn't necessarily optimize things for the project? Welcome, Bruce. So, so we just finished with the Academy Committee, and they walked through, and we'll try to get you up to speed. And now we're just talking about the timeline. We just started the conversation about the timeline. And I was saying that if we want to move forward with the May 6th referendum, and that seemed to be where the board was leaning, that we will need to vote at our next meeting just to officially adopt, not call the referendum, but just adopt a timeline so that we can start planning meetings and scheduling things and stuff like that. Scott, you're right. So, do we want to hold off until we have that conversation? Do we want to hold on to these bids? I think what I'm scratching my head with is these bids were way off what the estimates were. So why, the more I think about this, why are we bending over backwards to accommodate a bid package that kind of blew our budget, right? We know we're risking that there might be a slight, you know, that these could creep up again. And if we do a rebid after the May 6th referendum, assuming it gets approved. But I don't feel like we've got this, you know, great pricing that we're trying to hold on to either. You know what I mean? So,
So know what, like,
yeah.
from an industry standpoint, and this is where I
Yeah.
think we need coaching from Colliers and
Right.
maybe others, but is it cool to pull back a bid and go rebid something? You know, and I think I think in the process here, refining scope and trying to, you know, cross our T's maybe a little bit more in advance of the May 6th referendum, if that's in fact where we're going. But I guess I just feel like we need some guidance because this is not our area of expertise. You know,
Yep.
I have certainly haven't gone through that process before of a rebid. So I just want to make sure we're not, you know, stepping in any landmines or you know, legally,
Yeah,
I don't know what the issues might be.
Well, and I think we did talk about it at our last meeting a little bit, but I think it's worth having them come and talk through that again with us. You know, and so you're saying, I mean, because obviously for us to do anything prior to the bid expiring, we would have to get rolling now, right? So, and I think we kind of recognize that that's probably not a practical, realistic option for us at this point, to go out to referendum prior to March 20th. So if we can kind of, if we've concluded that, and I'm assuming we have, that helps. Now we can put that aside. Because if we were still going to try to do this before those bids expired, we would now really need to be rolling on scheduling meetings and all this other stuff. So your question is more, do we ask the bidders to keep their bids till May 6th or May 7th, right?
That may be a faux pas in the industry. I don't know.
Yeah, right,
So,
right. And they
I
had
just thought
said
that
it's
I thought they were
highly
going back and
unusual,
doing that.
highly unlikely. People usually hold bids for 30 days. It was extraordinary that they were keeping them for 100.
100, yeah.
But they could have those conversations. I have not spoken to them. So I can get an update from Colliers and whether or not any conversations have been had. And then go from there. I guess the question is, if we do that, then we're kind of stuck now with a package that is also not necessarily the best pricing, right? So, but it is giving us assurance of what the pricing is going to be, right? So,
Peggy, one other option we had spoken about at our last meeting was whether there was time to rebid a package in light of the timeline leading to a May referendum. Look, the history of this project, we've been reminded several times that those folks that professionally provide us with cost estimates are not always able to accurately predict what contractors are going to actually bid. And I guess I am somewhat hesitant to go back to referendum unless we are pretty sure we have a solid number to present to the public. So I guess, as Scott has suggested, I think we need to ask our advisors whether there's time to actually rebid this so that we have a solid number to take to the public.
So these are all we can have. I've asked those through town staff at times.
Sure.
And you know, our construction manager, who we now have a professional in this area that joined the town July 1st. That was part of our plan for the facilities department, has a lot of experience in that. And I think that, and I don't want to speak for him, and I think maybe we organize a conversation about this another time because I didn't prepare him for this. And I don't want to kind of drag him into this now.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it is, the problem is you don't have the funding secure, right? And that's how I look at this, right? So you're almost setting yourself up for failure again, right? Because now you don't have the fund. All we've done is take some of the alternates out and we've packaged it so it's maybe a cleaner, simpler package, but we still don't have that funding secure. So why is this more attractive than other projects out there in the market that have the funding secured? And we went through this with the new school, right? We were on paper just trying to get the funding secured so they could go out and move forward with their bidding process, hoping we were still going to be below that. Right? Normally you have like a budget and then you go out to bid. That's the typical process. This was unusual because the estimates were coming over the budgets, but we thought some of it was, we might luck out because as we saw with the school project that they came in low. So we said, let's take the risk because there's so many unknowns in renovating an old building. Let's take the risk and just see where the bids come out. And that's what we ended up doing. To try to do that again before a referendum, I don't know what's changed. If you're a contractor, why is this a better project now? You know, there's still uncertainty about the funding. You don't know how the public's going to vote. So whereas if we were to rebid after the May 6th vote, at least the public is supporting it, right? And so there's a fixed budget. So that was, like I said, the conversations that I had internally talking with staff. I think if the board wants to have that conversation, let's have it, let's talk again about all this. We talked a little bit, we talked some of this last time, right? But we can kind of readdress it before we kind of formalize any decisions moving forward. Happy to do that. And I'll have, I think him available as well as Collier's available for that conversation.
That would help. Again,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this in a very naive way, probably, but I can't imagine, putting a hold of bids aside. So that's a whole nother conversation, but whether or not we even get the same bidders in a rebid. There's no guarantees, I would assume, right? Maybe it opens up to more bidders. Maybe some of the same bidders don't come back. Who knows, right? But I have to think, in fairness to the people who are bidding, there's a cost to bid as well for them. So I just want to be conscious of that and really understand the process.
Right.
And to
Peter's
that
got his
point,
hand up. He might have some insight into Scott's question.
Sure. If you want to invite Peter up, like I said, we hadn't prepared to have this conversation today. So, but Peter, if you want to share, Peter is our facilities director who started with us at the beginning of the year. He replaced Bill McMahon just for the public's benefit. And our construction manager worked for Peter.
You're muted. Yep.
Yep.
I think it's a good time. I think Ben's ready to discuss. He's on the call right now. I think we should call him up. He's got a lot of good insight on this.
Okay, I didn't want to put him on the spot, so but
he's ready to
that's
roll.
okay. Yeah. All right.
Make it happen real time. Nice, Ben. Look at that. No pressure, Ben. No pressure.
Hey, you guys know if I'm going to be in a meeting, I'd rather participate.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. And sorry to put you on the spot.
No problem at all. Always happy to talk about this. And these are conversations that Peggy and Peter and I have had briefly in anticipation of a decision being made on when the referendum was going to happen. So happy to answer some of kind of those situational questions. Of course, they all come with the disclaimer of who the heck knows what's going to happen when we go out to the market. But just to kind of address some of your concerns. So first of all, rebidding is not a faux pas. There is no problem in canceling a bid process and starting again. That happens all the time. The number one reason why that happens is projects come in over budget. They even happen on state school construction grant projects, and then you have to go back to your funding sources. A lot of times work with the state. Wow. So that's not a problem. In terms of bidding again before May, I think you're basically just going to be in the same situation. What I think we should do is use the time between now and the May referendum to put together as tight as a bid package as we can. It sounds like the committee now knows what they want out of the building. They know where their alternates are. We bake those right into the bid package. One of the issues with this bid process, just on my kind of cursory analysis of it, is the alternate pricing had a very high standard deviation. So whereas the base bids, you had a couple within 10% of each other, which is good. The alternates had a huge fluctuation, which means there was some misunderstanding in the market about how those were presented. So the more we could get those into the base bid and clearly explained, the better. Sometimes it's hard when you're parsing through 200-page plans, figuring out what's in and what's out. So that's an opportunity there. So another thing, as Peggy mentioned, is going out to the market kind of with as strong of a position as you can, where we have the funding in place, we mean business, we're ready to go. This one was going out there, and I'm not saying it was a bad idea. I think given the circumstances and given the budgetary uncertainty, kind of testing the waters a little bit, I mean, it did pay some dividends here. I mean, if you hadn't done that, that's usually not a recommended practice, but if you hadn't done that, I think you'd actually be in a worse situation. So looking back, it probably was a good idea. But it's also now made you gun shy of the standard process, which is budget, referendum, or secure funding through whatever source you're going to do, and then build. I mean, we've been doing that in the public industry forever. And from time to time, your budget isn't adequate, and you do have to go for additional. So if we bid after the budget again, we are in a very strong position. It shows that the funding is in place, will attract the most bidders. We hope to have as clean of a bid package as possible, increase market participation, all those things. So I think that's a good, as you're thinking through your steps here, just to keep that in mind, that I don't think anybody's going to fault us for what we've done so far and doing this kind of in a measured fashion.
They will, Ben. Oh, they will. Oh, they'll fault us.
I mean the contractors. I don't mean the taxpayers.
Oh, okay. Wink, wink. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. That was really helpful. Is there, sorry, can I ask one more question? Sorry, while I have the mic. So
Happy to hand the mic over to anybody else on this topic.
I don't know if this is a Ben question, a Peter question, or even just the Board of Selectmen question, but just something we need to be thinking about is just the public optics of time, elapsed time. And I guess I worry about that, obviously from a 2022 referendum, and now, the needle continues to move, and, the building is having issues and, gets worse over time. Like, are we at risk at all by moving this to May and then having the bids after the fact that, I don't know even what I'm saying, but I worry about just that elapsed time, from when the committee started their process to when the public is actually going to get a community center. It's been a while now. It's been a hot minute. So
kind of my maybe even outsider's take on that is, yeah, it has been a while. And I think we're doing that across the board, not just with Academy, but we're doing that with a lot of projects throughout town and the Board of Ed projects is, a lot of these things have lingered. One of the reasons why I was happy to come here was just to start pushing these projects forward. But I would say what we don't want to do is kind of now in the 11th hour, stumble and end up the worst thing we could possibly do is spend any amount of money on constructing a building that doesn't meet its end use. So if that means waiting 3 months to get there, I think that's probably time well spent. But your point is definitely valid. I think the optics of it probably are like, wow, this is taking a long time. You guys get your act together and get moving. That's just something I think that's going to be said whether you referendum now or 3 months from now.
I want to call a spade, but I think your point is well taken. Ben, that we want to cross our T's here too. So thank you.
Yeah, I could not agree with Ben more. I mean, this has taken this long at this point. This is not the time to just sprint to the finish line and trip over our shoelaces, so to speak. I mean, we had, I think, 3 different committees that went into designing and researching and this whole package. And I think, that's where this whole thing got pushed out. It's not where we're at right now, just from my perspective, as a Board of Select member, but also as somebody who was not on the Board of Selectmen when this whole conversation first started. Gosh, I don't even know what year that was, 2019. And I know it's been going on even longer than that. So I know the public is very anxious to see this project have a finish line and cross that finish line, whatever the case may be. But to push for March and not wait until May, it makes 0 sense to me. So I think, you know, getting as much information out to the public as possible, getting our bids as tight as possible, you know, really making a definitive decision on what we're presenting to the public is the most important thing at this point.
Yeah, one thing I just like to add, if I may, is when you're concocting what this new budget number is, you know, give yourself room there. You're gonna need it on a project like this. This is a very old building that's sit vacant for a long time. If there was ever a building where something was gonna go wrong in the construction process, you're gonna find something you don't want to find, it's this. So what made me nervous about this project when I was first learning about it, first walked through the building is, you know, normally on a building that's been sitting that long, you're doing more of a gut and renovate. This is not a gut and renovate, but this is an expensive project. So it falls short of, you know, if you were going in there and saying, hey, we are gonna completely rip apart the interior, make sure the bones are good and kind of rebuild it, that's one thing. You're not, your risk potential is a lot lower than in a building like this where we're leaving hazardous materials in place. We are not doing this, we're not doing that. So there's going to be a big, so my suggestion when we were talking about what that budget number would be in the committee last night went further than me with actually breaking down all the pieces. That's great. But last week, my original thought was I said, take your median bid, not your low bid, take your median bid, add all your alternates in. If you parse them out later or whatever, fine. Add 10% to that. That's your new budget number. Because what you really don't want to do is go out to referendum again and then find out that A, your bids don't work, which they probably will, because again, you take that median bid. But what you really don't want to happen is during the project, something happens and now you're like $200 short of fixing a problem that's a showstopper in the building. And we're like, we don't have any more budget. So now what do? You go out for a supplemental referendum, you're pulling SIP funds from somewhere else, which is going to annoy a lot of people. So what I've learned in my experience, because it is painful to go back to the well for more money, is give yourself some room there. You could always give it back. And we've shown that on a lot of our projects in town. You see, we've been giving money back in a lot of these SIP projects that have been done. But I would give yourself as much cushion. If you think you're going to need 24, go for 25. Put it right on the record. If we don't need it, we're going to give it back. But if you get into this project, you need the money, there's going to be a problem. I know there were some issues brought up recently by the building inspector for some insulation, some building insulation. I don't think that's even been worked in the project yet. I think the design team is still digesting that right now. That could have a 7-figure cost implication. Don't mean to drop that as a bomb, but that's just a sense of things that happen where you're going to want to have that extra budget. So anyway, just my financial 2 cents.
Thank you for that. I know Joe Ballantyne has raised his hand. He wanted to contribute to the conversation for a moment, so.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what's been done so far, but there's an additional risk that we have not that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that none of the bidders are in any way bound to not to take this to the finish. Any of them in the next 100 days can simply withdraw their bid, and that risk. If we go out again we get the proper funding and could go out for a bid, and make an immediate award, would at least eliminate that risk. But we could go 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, and any of those bidders can withdraw their bid.
Yeah, they would have a tougher time doing that because the only way that you could withdraw from a bid without having your bid bond hit is you have to claim that you made a clerical error in your bid computation, which is what one of the bidders did that dropped out. But that's certainly getting into calling bid bonds and all that is not a fight you really want to do unless you have to. And especially because we now know that our funding isn't there. I think bidders would be able to contest that too and say, hey, you can't call my bid bond on a project you're not even going to build right now anyway. So.
All right. Well, I think that, that's helpful, Joe. I think, I guess the question is, you know, does anything we've talked about today change our timeline, our objective? So I think, you know, my thought is the
That's
next,
March.
our next meeting.
Yeah, it changes March.
Yeah, right. Well, so May 6th, it sounds like we'd been kind of leaning in that direction. Look, I was the one advocating for get it done, but that was when I thought we were going to be either within the budget or slightly over the budget, not $7 million. So it's a different conversation when you have to really understand what's driving that 7 million and what's the best next steps, right? So we need time to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that we have the right numbers and that we communicate to the public. And the last thing we need to do is push through with a timeline that's not going to allow that. So the timeline I sent to the board really would require us, if we adopt this at our next meeting, which is on January 27th, would require us roughly around February 3rd, which is our regular meeting, to kind of pick the number, right? And so because we would be voting on a supplemental appropriation for a certain amount of money, and we have a recommendation now from the building committee, I think we need to spend a little time thinking this through, understanding what's in those numbers. Do we want to change that? Obviously, we have an issue about, the number they came back with is higher than the grant funds. So that, we got to talk about how we would think about that, what we would get permission to do. So we would target having that decision made by February 11th. There's some wiggle room in that date. We could push it out. We could push it out for a couple weeks if we needed to. And it would lead basically, the month of March to educate the public about this. We would, do the final call to referendum on April 9th. And that is kind of our hard date. That's a date where I would say April 9th is where we would want to have, because now we're getting into, this is going to be on the budget referendum. So we need to have like a certain timeline that we're going to be following. So April 9th is really the hard date that we have to have our question. We have to have our amount. We have to have everything solidified. But we also need to get a Board of Finance, I guess, approval prior to that. So, so there's some, what I set you was, kind of like using our current meeting schedule and figuring out how it would work. I think we don't need to solidify this today, but think a little bit more about it. Do we want more time to come up with that number? So do I build into this instead of February 11th? Do I push it out a little bit more later in February? That means the Board of Finance would have to schedule a special meeting after we come up with our number, because our number, we make a recommendation, then it goes to the Board of Finance, right? So I was trying to stick with, we have our meeting, they have their meeting, it doesn't mean it has to be that way. So I can, if you think we're going to need more time coming up with that, what that number is going to be and our process, then I can kind of push this out a little bit. But right now, our number choice would be by February 11th.
So I have some thoughts about this. I think as far as arriving at a number, Ben has already done most of the math for us. And he probably knows exactly what that number is. So I don't think we need a lot of time if we're going to agree to his methodology. Maybe give he and Peter some time to rethink it and see if they want to stick with that median number plus the extras plus the, the 10%, whatever, maybe give them a little time to polish that math up a little bit. But I think that happens pretty quickly. As far as meetings go to discuss this, my preference would be to have a couple of special meetings in the evening, one topic where we don't come in with a 16-item agenda and try to squeeze this conversation in. Also, having the conversation in the morning might be frustrating for people that are trying to follow this because they can't make it. And so by scheduling a special meeting in the evening, it gives people at least a chance to follow along in real time, if nothing else. The people that are in favor, people that aren't in favor, at least they get to stay posted. So I would be prepared to sign up for a couple of special meetings if we needed to do that.
Which I will highlight. I do agree with you. I mean, obviously using our Tuesday morning meeting is not the optimal thing. The issue we've got is we've got budget workshops too. So I just wanted to flag that. That's why I need to really start planning, because we've got all these budget workshops, we've got budget meetings. It's kind of hitting at the same time. So So does the rest of the board agree you'd rather do most of these conversations in special meetings? Okay.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
say special meetings, or if we're going to do it during one of our regular meetings, keep the other agenda items light.
Right, okay.
I mean, in
Okay,
theory,
so-
we can dedicate an evening meeting to just a topic like this, right? We can just keep the
Oh,
agenda
yeah. Yeah,
clean.
we can. It just, you know, as you know, there's a lot of things that people want to come, we heard from the public today, you know, that there are a lot of things that the public wants us to address. So I'm just trying to be mindful of that and also know that there's a big time commitment, just reminding the public because of the budgeting process.
Yeah.
We have all these other special meetings going on. So we gotta, you know, people have lives outside of this. I know this is my full-time job, but the rest of the board. So we need to kind of make it work plus staff, you know, so I'm just trying to be mindful of that. So I will rethink this timeline a little bit. And, you know, maybe what we vote on the 27th is not dates specifically, but just that we're gonna work towards a May 6th referendum without a specific calendar schedule. Because I think that's gonna have to evolve a little bit, but I will refresh this with some ideas about how we could work the schedule. To be more common, so we could have more, some of these in the evening. And then I'll have some offline conversations with Ben and Peter about, you know, what other due diligence do we need to do before we finally nail this all down, right? Because once again, we don't want to, you know, get fixated on a number and say, this is the number. And then all of a sudden something else comes in 2 weeks later and we're like, oh, we should have added that to this. Right. So, and so I just don't know what that is right now. So I think then, you know, so I think that'll be the goal then, is just somehow blessing in some way at our next meeting, May 6th, to allow the planning process to begin for that. And then we'll figure out the detailed meeting schedule, in the next couple of weeks. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on from there. A lot of good conversation though, and I know I went into the weeds a little bit on the project, but I think we really need to do that to clarify. There's just a lot of like, you know, information floating out there, and I want to make really sure people understand exactly what is in this and why, and I thought seeing that visual, I haven't seen it in a while. I mean, look how beautiful this is going to be in terms of it's transformational to the whole space down there. And that's where I think we got to look at it a little differently. It's not just renovating a building, it's transforming that whole part of Madison by the Green.
Add space to usable space.
Yeah, it's a usable, beautiful space. And that's going to have a big impact on, I think, activity down in that area and benefit our downtown. It's going to create economic activity. So anyway.
I walked that space, Peggy, and that the transformation will be unbelievable. I mean, right now it's really pretty run down, and what we saw was much better. But I did want to ask what you thought the committee would, what our charge would be. I have an idea what it would be, but I just was wondering what the board might expect from the building committee as we go, just even in the short term.
I mean, I think the first thing is just a little more detail, you know, which your advisors could prepare about what's in this, right? Now, with the choices that you made, and then what was opted out of it, right? I think that would be helpful. You know, I don't know.
And what's out? I think it's super simple.
Yeah. I just think, you know, you can take your time now, because I appreciate that this was just a conversation. You just met about this last night, but just having some detail on that. And I think even if that were to be done, if Colliers could do a memo, just, you know, highlighting that with a table, like boom, 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 this is in this piece, and this is why these two things were left out, that kind of thing. That would be helpful.
One of the things that, as we look forward and listening to the conversation, if we are going to rebid that, if that becomes the preferred path, I think we would put it back all into a single bid and not have the ad alternates, because I agree with Ben that I think it showed that the understanding of what's in and what's out in the ad alternates varied from bidder to bidder. And that's why we got the large variations. And we could remove that by making it into a single package and make it one award instead of using the ad alternate approach. Something I'd like to discuss with the committee and our people, but I'd like to talk about that.
In terms of and that would be part of the conversation as we move up to referendum, like how that bid package would be structured.
Right.
And that is, ideally, we want to pick our number, have the vote, and if it passes, immediately within days, go out and get this launched, right? Get the bid out, because we want to get things moving as quickly as we can. So we'll certainly be.
That would preclude us going to the bidders and asking if they will hold their bid, which we can do. That's something we can do, but
Well, I think
that doesn't appear we're going down that path.
I think that we heard pretty good advice that that's not really going to help the project, so to speak. But I don't know. I guess, have we made a decision that we're not going to ask them to hold the bids?
I think that's what I'm hearing.
I think there's a general consensus here that that's not the preferred path, because I don't think we necessarily benefit from that.
Agreed.
So
Agreed. Yep.
Okay. So
thank you.
So with that, thank you, Joe. And so with that, we will move on, I guess, we got a couple of other agenda items. I know Ben is here for some of those anyway. So, and Peter. So if the board is good, we'll move on to item number 9. And item number 9 is discuss and take action to approve a return of $51,566.42 in the CIP Tech Accounting HR Payroll Upgrade Project to the CIP Technology Equipment Account pending Board of Finance approval.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, so this is basically funds that were not being used, where we saved some money and we're just returning it back to the account. And this is part of the work that Peter and Ben have been doing really over the last 6 months, really digging into these projects and finding, okay, do we need the funding anymore? Can we return it? So this is all good stuff. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item number 10, discuss and take action to approve a funding request from the Technology Department in the amount of $30,000 from the CIP Technology Equipment Account to the CIP Telephone Upgrade Project pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved. Second.
So now we have another project that is actually been planning for a while to upgrade the telephones in town. And we actually got actually, is Art on here? Yeah, okay, why don't we let Art talk about it? I'm sorry, I'm confusing. But anyways, we actually have contract pricing now that came in, and so some additional funding was going to be used needed for this. Go ahead, Art, you can unmute. Hey, welcome.
Yeah, this has been a project that's been on the books for quite some time. It began with a few years back doing the upgrade at the police department phone system. And now we're looking to do the rest of the town and schools. It was put out to bid. We had 3 responders, and this was the low bid. And it's a company that we have done business with before that we're very pleased with. Actually, we knew 2 of the 3 companies. The third one was way out of line with the pricing, and this it looks very good. The scope of the project is really replacing about 10 or 11 small phone systems that are linked together with 2 systems, one here at town campus and one at Daniel Hand High School. Excuse me. And those are it's basically a redesign that leverages our data network a lot more than it currently does. And this will be a good stepping stone for when we do have additional buildings to bring on. It'll be a lot less of an investment in the phones. They won't need another individual system. It's primarily very straightforward. Phone systems are mostly computer hardware and software now. It's a server, it's a bunch of software, and then a lot of configuration, and then some running around with handsets. So, I don't think there's anything really crazy about this. We were just a little bit short on the low bid, but not bad because the numbers were really came up with the numbers over 5 years ago. So hopefully we're in a good space, a good place. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try and help answer.
Any questions for Art? I know the staff is very excited to see this upgrade happen, and it's also gonna give a lot of features that we don't have in terms of being able to remote access, and forwarding to cell phones and things like that. That will make life a little easier at times, especially for folks out in the field. So we're excited to see this move forward. All right, with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And following on the same thing, item number 11, discuss and take action to award a contract to Connecticut Communications LLC for an amount not to exceed $270,000 for the CIP telephone upgrade project as recommended by the Technology Department, and to authorize the first selectman to sign all documents associated with this award, budgeted in the Capital Improvement Program Technology Reserve, pending Board of Finance approval of additional funding.
So moved.
Okay. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Great, thank you, Art.
Thank
Excited
you.
to see this forward. Item number 12, discuss and take action to accept a recommendation from the Facilities Department to award a contract to BMP Construction for the Brown School Pre-K Room Conversion Project for $500,417.59, and to authorize the first selectman to sign all contracts and documents associated with this award. Company was selected utilizing the CROG Easy QC program budgeted in the fiscal year 24-25 capital improvement plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, so this is a project that I think was part of the CIP, actively discussed a lot last year during the CIP process last year, about some of the changes going on at Brown School. So I thought if I don't know, Peter, if you just want to walk through what's included in the project.
Yeah, Ben's going to help us out here too with this, but it was to convert 2 classrooms, the STEAM classrooms, which are located down on the first level, to convert them over to pre-K classrooms for the Brown School. This gives us a perfect opportunity to incorporate this with the site plan expansion with drop off. It's a first level area, so that parents can actually access that whole area by dropping off their kids on a first level coming into the back side of both classrooms. It's a conversion involving mostly where most of the work is involved is adding the 2 bathrooms that are going to be in those 2 areas, which which is the shared office at this point. Ben, did I cover everything there on what it is on what the plan is?
Yeah, it's a complete refresh of both of those spaces. Just for clarity, the exterior work is a separate project. That project is going out to bid. It's actually going to planning and zoning on Thursday, and ACA tonight. But that'll go out to bid in the next probably month or so. This is the interior portion of the work. So as Peter said, it's a big portion of it is converting, is actually establishing 2 new restrooms in an area that's what is now a storage room. These rooms are set up as like industrial art style classrooms. There's no ceilings in them. It's got industrial lighting. There's asbestos tile flooring in there. There's electrical everywhere. There's drop downs for equipment and things like that. So it's really converting the space into a pre-K use. So we're building cubbies and millwork appropriate for pre-K kids, sinks, things of that nature. So it'll be like walking into 2 new classrooms. So this continues the momentum. We're using the same fit and finish as the other classrooms that have been renovated at Brown over the past 2 years, just to get everything to kind of tie cohesively. So this is one piece in a lot of work that's happening at Brown over the summer.
I believe Dr. Cook's on for any other curricular-based questions that may come up.
I mean, I want to get right out and say that I don't object to this project per se. but I am very uncomfortable with the funding mechanism for it. This is directly related to the referendum project, the construction of the new school, the renovation of Polson, and the renovation at Brown to accommodate the new school organization. And we are seeking funding outside of the referendum. And, you know, it's a change in the program. I get it. And maybe it's something that after the referendum was discovered to make sense. But like we've done at Neck River, we've kept the money inside of the referendum question. I'm not going to support the 500,000 from the CIP. I would support the project through the already allocated funds for the 3-school project.
That was going to be my question as well, is with this being part of that whole school renewal project, why is the funding being requested this way as opposed to going through the budget that was set aside through the referendum?
So let's remind though, this has already been approved in CIP last year. So this was part of the extensive conversations last year. The Board of Ed submitted a package of projects last year. And I think Al and Jen, you served on CIP last year. If you recall, there was a package that was submitted that included some additional work at Brown. And I know that there were conversations about, you know, what is new? Why wasn't this in the original referendum? And I wasn't part of those conversations at CIP, but I know it was talked about extensively. And I think the CIP committee, if I recall, actually value engineered it down a little bit and broke it up into different individual projects versus there was kind of a lump sum submitted. So I'm just saying we're not asking for the funding now because the funding was approved through the CIP plan last year. This is just to actually award the contract unless I'm mistaken. And so, you know, maybe it would be helpful. I know I wasn't part of the CIP conversations last year, so to kind of talk about the origins of the package that had been submitted. And I don't know if that's more appropriate for Dr. Cook, because I know Peter was not here and neither was Ben, right? For that. So, but I think there was things that they realized as they got into this, like we really kind of need to make these other changes. And that was not anticipated during the original referendum.
But, you know, CIP is a planning document. You know, we're talking about the funding. So, and I went through the approved CIP, which has an itemized list of the work to be done at Brown, and this isn't on it. So
from last year, Bruce?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was submitted versus, I just know this was a big topic.
So I'm referencing the document that was approved at referendum, the CIP that was approved at referendum. And there's a detail page for Brown School, and this isn't on it. And there's nothing that even looks remotely like it. But even if it's in there, my objection is to the funding mechanism, not to the project itself. So the fact that it is or isn't in CIP is not really relevant to the point I'm trying to make. That we went to the public on the Neck River School to seek extra funding outside of the bonding amount, which I supported. I thought it was a good idea, and I thought it was a good way to do it. I thought it was an efficient way to make those changes. And the public overwhelmingly came back and said, no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to stick to the budget. And so we found money in the project. And I think, I don't think anything has changed with regards to that sentiment. So that's why I'm, you know, saying that
I guess, Bruce, though, my question is, though, that should have been the conversation last year when this was approved in CIP.
We as a board never had a conversation about the changing in the scope of the project at Brown School, and looking at the document, there is no evidence that it's there. So if there were discussions in the CIP, they didn't get translated clearly into the document.
Okay, so I guess, maybe Craig, you can talk about it, because I know this was like, there was $1 million, I think, submitted by the Board of Education Facilities Committee. There was a lot of conversation. I know that the CIP had, so I guess Jen and Al can speak to this, but eventually this was winnowed down and it was broken up into different projects. So I'll let Craig speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. I would start with, I think there is differences with our two existing schools versus the new school. And I just want to draw that distinction. So both Polson and Brown have had ongoing CIP projects that were committed to things related to the reorg or continuing to move the building forward that are that weren't part of the original referendum. And so for the Brown School in particular, $6 million was committed. That was never going to be enough to commit it, change it over to a pre-K to 5 school. So items like parking, windows, playground, and we're part of CIP to get this done. Plan and cycle maintenance has also been committed to Brown and Polson to continue to move the building forward. The other piece, the other funding stream for this was the board's carryover funding. So, with the new state law, the board had the 2% that it could carry over. It committed, I believe, about $130,000 towards this project because we knew we needed to get that done of the year-end funds for that. So it's a combination of the CIP and then the carryover funds that the board voted on and submitted that to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finances as our new process. This is year 1, but we committed that, we sent that letter as soon as that was done. And so, this is a core project that we need to get done by September in order to be ready for the reorg in September.
And maybe I just need us all to agree. The public voted on Brown School being a kindergarten through 5th grade school. It didn't vote on Brown as a pre-K. And all of the materials that went out in the question that was voted on is Neck River pre-K through 5, Brown K through 5. I'm not going to second guess the wisdom of rethinking that and the wisdom of making space for pre-K at Brown. Again, I'm not taking issue with that. This feels like a bit of a sidestep to the referendum. And if we needed to adjust, if it's the right thing to do to adjust, we should do it within the confines of the money allocated for the projects.
If it's a sidestep of the referendum, Bruce, isn't that the point of why we would put it in CIP? Because it's a separate capital project. It's a separate line item. It's something different than what the voters voted on.
All of these projects are in the CIP. They are all CIP projects. And that is the planning tool.
My point is it's a separate line item than the ones that were voted on via the referendum.
The CIP lists projects for Brown in detail and doesn't have this in it. I can't say any more than that. If it's somewhere else in the 100+ page document, then maybe it is, but I don't know why it would be.
And in terms of the need to not have it at Neck River, so we'll have 4 preschool classrooms next year, and that's based on students that weren't even born when we did the referendum. So they'll be 3 years old next year, and they'll be coming into preschool. We have to identify them through Child Find, and we would not have the classroom space. We would start off. We'd have to move portables over to Neck River if we were truly to start, and require pre-K to be over there.
I mean, I think that what I struggle with, Bruce, is that if we recall, there was the $89.9 million, right? And then there was the $130 million of capital projects, right? We've known all along that there are other capital projects that that the schools are going to need to be upgraded and things like that. We're going to continue to see things where the world didn't come to a halt on, February 2022 in terms of what the plan was going to be for the schools. Things are evolving in real time as we adapt to demographics, adapt to whatever things we find happen during our project, as we've seen with Academy. Things have just evolved. I don't think that the school was trying to sidestep. I think they were just saying, this is a smarter thing to do. You know, the Brown had very little funds allocated to it as a part of the referendum project, right? That was the smallest. It was 6 million versus, you know, building the new school. This was discussed. I mean, I think, I guess my point is this was all hashed out last year, in my view, right? That's why this project, this funding is there. You
We're
know,
at the
I feel like
contracting phase.
yeah, it's at the contracting phase. Like, I agree, like, if we were to be talking about this last year, this is a debate, right? But I also hear you, because I think it's optics for the public, right? And so one of the things we can talk about and debate more about this, I think, is when Neck River is the Neck Building Committee is gonna be coming back, and we're gonna see where their budget is, right? We have the ability to shift funds between the different projects. We're gonna hear where Polson's landing. We're gonna be probably, fortunately, under budget on Neck River in a number of areas. So then the question becomes, should this be paid for? Should we reimburse ourselves, right, out of the Neck River funds for the money that's coming out of CIP for this, if this is truly considered part of what should have been in the referendum? I think we could have that debate, because that's when we're going to be shifting funds around between the projects from the referendum, and talk about that. Because it's not, I'm not saying, I think what you're raising is fair, but there is a point in town where we just have to be like moving on and saying, we can't keep going back to the February 2022 referendum and saying that should have been in there. So therefore you got to pay for it out of that money. I think we got to just say, okay, we are where we are. Some decisions were made. We need to add these bathrooms to make improvements so we can serve the pre-K population. Projects are going to be submitted for the schools and for all our buildings every year through CIP process, and that's the process we go through. This was approved through that process, and the funding was approved last year. So, but I think I'm willing, and I don't know if the board, I mean, you know, we can have that as part of the conversation when Neck River comes back, and if there's funds left over from Neck River, we could reimburse ourselves for this.
Right, but if there isn't, then we will have taken money out of the fund balance to do this. Because it's not funded in the CIP, is it? It's a special appropriation, isn't it?
No, it's funded. I mean, my understanding, this is coming directly from CIP. There was a whole package of projects that were submitted to CIP last year that included Brown School, and that were approved by the facilities committee at the Board of Ed. So, I mean, maybe we need to go back and look at that, but I just know, because there was some other funding that was in there, you know, there was a whole list of stuff, and it all went through an extensive conversation. And once again, I'm kind of deferring to our Board of Selectmen CIP members, and I know it's hard to remember what happened last year when you're like in the middle of this year, right?
Well,
so
that's
maybe
exactly...
you guys took some time like thinking back about what was discussed last year.
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's hard to remember what we talked about last year when we're
right.
You know, literally just finished the process this week. But even as I look at my book right now for the 24-25 CIP, like I can't, this is this year's book that has last year's, you know, line item dollar amount approvals in it. And I'm seeing signage and wayfinding, FF&E and move management. That's a large dollar amount right there, was 800,000. So I don't know if this was part of that FF&E and move management that was approved. Parking expansion, walk-in coolers, and millwork replacement, and kindergarten play area are what we had in the CIP approved from last year. So, you know, again, just trying to remember.
So maybe Ben, do you know, because I know
jump in
Ben
here, 'cause-
inherited this package, just so you
Let-
know, right? This was Bill McMinn was last year. Ben inherited this package, so maybe
Yeah.
he could talk a little bit to it.
Sure. I went through the same exercise because what I did with all of our projects, but more specifically this project was reverse. I'm a finance guy, so I reverse engineer everything based on following the money, and then I apply the facilities and contracting and construction to it. So that was a bit of a challenge to do in this project. But those projects that you just mentioned are the approved SIP projects. So I track every project that's outlined in our budget that's SIP. What this project is part of millwork and part of that FF&E move management. And
Okay.
Dr. Cook, jump in if I'm off here, but in everything that I read, trying to figure out where the funding was coming from here, what it looked like was Brown School went out to referendum for a massive improvement project. That number was never enough to cover everything that was needed to convert Brown into its school. Whether PK was part of that or not, I don't know. I never really got involved in that aspect of it. There were several projects cobbled together that went into this summer to continue the renovation of that building that were paid for directly through the CNR. So I think another thing we're confusing is the capital improvement plan, which is over here, and then the capital improvement funding, which is called CNRE, capital non-recurring expenses. So you pull down out of your SIP and you fund with CNRE. So those projects that Jen, you just mentioned are all funded through CNRE. So
Okay.
the way this specific project is funding the 500,000 is maxing out the millwork project. The millwork was a continuation of this summer where we were redoing all the millwork in every classroom. That is also the project that accepted the funds that Dr. Cook just talked about from Capital Reserve, which was Board of Ed operating year-end funds that were diverted over to this. The board could withhold up to 2%. Those were allocated to this project, which increased the project budget of the millwork project from the number you see in your CNRE to that 322. We're maxing that out. Then the residual, which is 178, is going into that FF&E Move Management Fund project. That project is also holding several other activities to get that school up and running for next year, including actually Move Management, which was actually supposed to go before the board today. For some reason, I think it just got left off the agenda for some reason, but is our entire gross move package throughout the entire district. It's about $150,000. So there are several pieces that were part of that. I did find a few documents again when I was reverse engineering all this, that in that Move Management FF&E kind of catch-all project to like finish off everything to get the school started, converting those 2 rooms into PK was there. And it was at that point where I kicked it into the next construction phase and started designing and building the project.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was the reminder I personally needed because again, you see the numbers on these sheets, but they're not broken down into detail. So, okay, perfect. Thank you, Ben.
And that's where I think that, now you probably remember there was a big conversation about this, right? Because of the fact that this was after the referendum, right? And it was a package that was coming. And so I know that's why there was so much conversation last year. And I think there were some reductions that were made by CIP, if I recall, on some of these things by the committee to kind of scale it down a little bit. So I guess that, Bruce, I guess my point is that from a timing standpoint, like last year was really the funding conversation. But I think it's a relevant discussion as we move forward and look at where we are in the project balances for the bonding referendum, that we may opt to do that, right? Because ultimately it is tied to the renewal plan, right? And so would we want to pull from that? Because the problem is we can't just say, we're not going to fund this now. It was approved funding, but also we have to do it in order to stick to the schedule. And they'd have to if we don't add those bathrooms, we can't have a functioning pre-K space, right? And so then we'd have to it would cause a chain of events that would escalate into a lot more money than what this $500,000 is, I would think.
We moved money from Polson pretty easily over to Neck River. Why isn't that mechanism available to us now?
I would argue we don't need to do that because the conversation should have happened last year. We approved this. I know.
I would really like to if either Jeannie or you could point me to the meeting where this board took up the discussion of expanding Brown to be a PK. school, because I just don't remember it at all. And if I was part of it and I'd forgotten it, shame on me. If it was happened in the CIP at great detail, that detail was never translated back to us. So
So
I must
I
say
don't
there
think
wasn't
it's
a lot of
our,
discussion.
well, I think that Dr. Cook can talk about, first of all, we're not the experts about, redistricting. So there's going to be different redistricting, right? There's going to be different
Right,
kids
but
from
I
school
think you're
thought they
trying to
were
say
going to
that
the
I've
new
missed
school,
my
now they're not.
opportunity to
So,
really talk about this, and
right.
maybe I have.
Yeah.
And I recognize I'm 1 in 5 votes here. Again, my issue is not with the project or the wisdom behind the decision to put PK at Brown. My issue is the way we're funding it. I think it should come out of the referendum money, the bonding money, because it is clearly part of that project.
Okay, well, I think that in order to proceed, I feel today we're awarding a contract, and so I think we should just vote on the contract. I think that the discussion of this, though, when we are looking at the balances of the referendum funding, it's a worthy discussion, right? Do we reimburse ourselves through the referendum funds for some of these ancillary projects that kind of evolved out of the renewal plan, new things that kind of came out of it? And I think that's a discussion that would need to be had later when we know where we are with the balances in the other project accounts. That's my suggestion. So I think, I'd like to at least move forward with the contract because the funding has already been approved. And allow them to get on, because this is kind of critical, right, to get done. Isn't this over April break? I think you're doing these
Asbestos removal during April break. Yeah, that's.
yeah, okay. Okay, so let's proceed with that, Bruce, but then the conversation will come back up when we talk more about the project, the balances for the referendum, okay?
Mhm.
All right, so moving on, I'd like to make a motion to approve the award of the contract.
I think we're
as
in
part-
discussion.
We're
I think
in
we're
the
in.
discussion.
That's right, I already moved it. So anyways, all in favor of item 12, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and all,
I'm
any
going
nay
to
or
abstain just for the
abstain?
record to
Okay.
show that I had a little, because again, I don't think the project's a bad idea in any way.
Yeah.
I just, I don't
I
want.
hear you, I hear you. Okay, good. So we have 4 yeses and 1 abstention, Jean, for the record. It's all worthy what you're talking about. So and we have a lot going on. So that's why when I look at the CIP people, I get it. It's a lot of detail, and that's why we have our staff here who is living and breathing this every day. So I appreciate that they can kind of talk to this. But we will carry on this conversation when we talk about the Neck River project, okay? All right, so item number 12 passes. So item number 13 is citizens' comments. Thank you, Craig, and Ben and Peter.
There are no citizens on, or no
Okay.
hands raised.
All right, great. So we'll move on to item number 7. And for the public's benefit, we're going to go into executive session that has to do with a lease negotiation. And when we come back, we will just be adjourning, so there won't be any further public comment after that. I'd like to make a motion to move us into executive session and to invite in Sam DeBura, John Anako, and Stacy Nobitz, and Jeannie Stevens.
So moved.
Second, okay, great. All right, we are now going to be moving into executive session, and the webinar will be locked from the public. So, thank you. I'll just give her a few minutes to do this.
I don't see John on.
Did you get a presentation from the Academy committee?
Let's just make sure we're off and not recording. Are we not recording?
Oh, we can't talk about Academy in an executive session.
I'm just asking if I could get a copy of the presentation.
No, there was no well, yes, there was a couple slides they put up, so I'll ask for those.
Those were previous. I think it was all previous stuff. It was from the.
You're recording again.
Okay, great. So we're back out of executive session. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Meeting is
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Good
Bye,
good
guys.
conversation today. Bye-bye.